Every once in a while, a show comes out of nowhere that totally blindsides you with the sheer force and quality of its storytelling, and you just know you have to talk about it to someone. Luckily, I have quite a few people to talk to, so here we are with a new series of videos I'll be doing from time to time, The Drinker Recommends. And in this case, The Drinker recommends you drop what you're doing and watch the HBO miniseries Chernobyl right now. Believe me, it'll be worth it. Now, out of respect for my Russian comrades, I've ditched the Jack and fetched a bottle of Stolly for the duration of this video. So pour yourself a shot and let's get into this. So anyone who knows a bit of history, or played that mission from Modern Warfare, will be familiar with the story of Chernobyl already. On the night of April 26th, 1986, the number 4 reactor went critical and exploded, flattening half the complex and releasing a huge amounts of radiation into the atmosphere. Ultimately, Chernobyl proved to be the worst nuclear disaster in human history, resulting in nearly 3,000 square kilometers and whole cities being permanently abandoned. 31 people died as a direct result of the explosion, but the final death toll from cancer and other horrible health problems could probably run into the tens of thousands. But why did it happen? Was it human error, technical failure, or something more sinister? The HBO series Chernobyl ultimately does its best to answer these questions, but the real focus of the show isn't on the technical reasons behind the disaster, it's on something far more personal. It's about the chaos and the confusion in the aftermath of the explosion, the human mistakes, bravery and sacrifices of those who fought to contain it, and the gradual realization by the Soviet government of the nightmare they were facing. Now, I've always had an interest in the Chernobyl disaster. I even wrote a book set in the aftermath, so it was pretty exciting to learn that there was a mini-series all about it coming out. The problem is, I had no idea if it would be any good, and considering it was written by the same guy who did Scary Movie and The Hangover 2, my hopes weren't exactly high. But wow, was I wrong. The series starts with a bang, literally. The nuclear reactor at Chernobyl explodes during a routine safety test, and straight away we get to see the devastation caused by the accident. The place looks like a bomb just went off. Stuff's on fire, corridors have collapsed and steam pipes have ruptured. But the real danger is one you can't see. Men are getting fatal radiation doses within a matter of minutes as they struggle to rescue injured colleagues and escape from the burning building. Meanwhile, the guys in the control room have no idea what just happened. Their plant's on fire, alarms are going off, and there are chunks of reactor core lying on the ground outside their building. Now, I'm no expert on nuclear engineering, but I'm pretty sure that's a bad sign. But the chief engineer is all like, "Nah, it'll be fine, comrades." He refuses to believe that the reactor's melted down, even when his men start collapsing with radiation sickness, because it's a safe design that can't explode. Or can it? So the first episode's all about the immediate consequences of the accident, and the total lack of understanding about the danger involved. People in the nearby city of Pripyat are out on the street watching the plant burn, drinking and vodka and acting like it's a big party, even as radioactive dust starts falling all around them. Firemen venture into the contaminated building with no protective gear to put out the blaze, absorbing lethal doses in the process. Soon the hospitals are overwhelmed with men suffering from radiation sickness, and it's obvious things are much worse than they're being told. The second and third episodes deal with the Soviet response to the accident as they slowly wake up to the reality of the situation. Evacuations are finally ordered and the military's mobilized to tackle the disaster as the burning reactor core threatens to break through into the flooded basement and cause an even bigger explosion. Desperate measures are needed to stop it. The fourth episode picks up in the months following the accident. The immediate danger of a nuclear explosion is past, but now they're facing the much bigger and longer battle to clean up the area and trying to limit the damage. There's a kind of bleak weariness to this whole episode, and you can almost feel how exhausted and disillusioned the men have become. The final episode is where we get our answers to how and why the accident happened. It's kind of like a courtroom drama mixed in with flashbacks to the night of the explosion, showing the decisions and mistakes that led to the disaster. And I think it was the right decision to leave this part to the end. When you've seen the terrifying results of the accident, every choice leading up to it feels so much more significant. And it's pretty fucking shocking to see the total disregard for safety in the control room. I mean, I'm not really one for health and safety, but if I was sitting on top of a nuclear bomb, I think I would be a little bit more careful with what I was doing. The series ends with a sobering reflection on the price of living in a world of lies, where the truth can literally get you killed. The thing that makes Chernobyl work so well for me is that it strikes a perfect balance between the large-scale efforts to contain the disaster and the very human stories of the people most affected by it. We get to experience the narrative from multiple points of view, from a simple housewife living in Pripyat to the scientists trying to warn people of the real dangers, all the way up to the highest levels of Soviet government. Chernobyl at its best shows us the contrast between the denial and the incompetence of the Soviet bureaucracy and the heroism and sacrifices of the people on the ground. The plant managers refusing to believe the reactor exploded against the young men who willingly go on a suicide mission into the basement to release the water trapped there. The local officials ordering a news blackout compared to the firefighters absorbing lethal radiation to prevent an even worse explosion. The clueless government in Moscow against the coal miners working in appalling conditions to dig a tunnel beneath the ruined plant. And that's not even mentioning the thousands of men forced to work in 90-second shifts on the roof of the destroyed building, shoveling pieces of reactor fuel over the sides so it could be sealed away, or the helicopter pilots risking their lives to drop fire-dampening sand into the burning core. Whenever I see people today claiming to have PTSD because Donald Trump got elected or someone said a mean thing to them on Twitter once, I like to imagine how they'd cope with being in a situation like Chernobyl, and that pretty much puts life into perspective for me. The show also doesn't shy away from the horrifying effects of radiation on the human body. A big chunk of episode 3 centres around the first responders that have been shipped off to a hospital in Moscow, where they seem to recover for a few days before their bodies start to break down. I don't consider myself a squeamish person, but it makes for pretty uncomfortable viewing when skin literally starts to fall off and once healthy young men are reduced to living skeletons slowly rotting from the inside. And watching them being hurriedly sealed in lead coffins with concrete poured over them really brings home the desperate measures the authorities were forced to take. Production values on Chernobyl are excellent, and most of the locations look real and authentic, mainly because they actually are. From what I understand, a lot of the scenes were filmed in real nuclear power plants similar to Chernobyl, and in cities in Lithuania to simulate Pripyat. That's the advantage of making everything the same in the Soviet Union, I guess. The acting's top-notch across the board, especially Jared Harris as a Soviet scientist trying to manage the disaster, Stellan Skarsgård as a government official slowly waking up to the scale of the disaster, and Jessie Buckley as the wife of one of the firefighters dying from radiation sickness. Emily Watson plays a composite character who represents dozens of real nuclear scientists who work to expose the real reason for the disaster. And while she gives a great performance, it does become obvious at times that her character's there to push the narrative along rather than to represent real events. One thing people seem to take issue with in the comments section is the fact that the actors generally speak with their real British accents, and it ruined the immersion for them. But really, what would you rather they did? Either they speak English with goofy fake Russian accents, or they speak in actual Russian and you're forced to read subtitles for the next 5 hours. I know which one I'd prefer. The series is generally pretty faithful to the events and causes leading up to the accident and its aftermath, but obviously some of the more technical aspects have been simplified and condensed for the sake of narrative convenience and audience understanding. And I'm fine with that, to be honest. I'm sure there are plenty of armchair nuclear experts eager to show how smart they are by rubbishing the explanations of the accident, but honestly, from what I know about the disaster, I think Chernobyl tells its story without sacrificing too much historical accuracy. More importantly, I think it does well to avoid placing the blame on any one person or decision. There's no specific bad guy here that has to be defeated or held to account. I mean, obviously there were men more responsible than others, but really, Chernobyl happened because of a long list of design flaws, cost-cutting, mismanagement, human error, and simple bad luck. If anything, most of the criticisms levelled at the Soviet system of government and the blame culture that grew up around it. It's a society where people deny basic and provable scientific facts because they find them unacceptable, which is more relevant today than you might think. It's a world where people can be imprisoned or even killed for saying something politically incorrect, where lies become so common that the truth is a foreign concept, and ultimately, the real cost of these lies is measured in human suffering. Ultimately then, Chernobyl is a tense, compelling and sobering reminder of the worst nuclear disaster in human history. It's a show that had me gripped from the first explosive episode to the final poignant scene, and it was the perfect antidote to the boring, disappointing disaster that was the final season of Game of Thrones. Now, you may find this hard to believe, but deep in my cold black heart there's still a tiny sliver of decency and compassion, and because of that, I'm not comfortable with the idea of profiting from a human tragedy like this. So I'm going to see to it that any ad revenue from this video gets donated to the Chernobyl Children's Project. It's a charity which provides medical relief and financial aid to children affected by the ongoing health consequences of Chernobyl. I'll also leave a link in the description if you feel inclined to make a donation directly. Anyway, that's my one and only good deed for the year, and it's all I have for today. Go away now.